Hi folks, my name is Adam and I like to make tiny nerdy things, and in keeping with that tiny nerdy theme, today I'm going to make some regular sized fruit. Now, if my goal here is to make a regular sized plate of fruit, then I'm going to need something to make sure that I keep all the details at scale. So naturally, I started by making a banana. And like any good banana, it needs a skeleton so that I can add the stringy yellow banana body on top. Now, I built my skeleton out of a densely packed roll of aluminium foil, then ruined a perfectly good saw by cutting the top part into 4 sections, which will serve as my banana peel later. Then I can coat the shiny metal in a layer of clay and build it up until I have an adequately girthy, AdSense-friendly banana-shaped lump of clay. Now, I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 of you that are looking at this and wondering, why is he making a bunch of fruit? Well, to answer that, we need to take a trip back in time to the year 2021, when a young and impressionable Adam was watching a video by the ineffable Jack, who was busy making the creepiest hamburger on YouTube. So I thought to myself, I too would like to make some food. However, I'm not really a burger guy, but I do love to sample some of nature's finest natural candies, so I said to the voices in my head, no, I don't have time to set any fires today, because I'm going to be busy making fruit. Otherwise, at this point, I've got my banana body built up and baked once to keep the shape in place so that I can handle it without worrying about deforming it, while I add the ever-important banana peels, which I have curled up and hung down to really give my banana a sense of movement and action. Then it's just a case of adding the different textures of the inner peel using an IRL banana as both a reference and a reward for a job well done. Finally, I'm left with a single, surprisingly convincing looking banana peel texture that can be easily flicked onto the other sections. Then I can set the banana bottom aside and get started on the top half. I'll start with another block of clay that I can cut down to the appropriate size and then roll out to fit the top of my banana before carefully quartering it so I have 4 equal banana tentacles. Then I'll squish and squeeze and prod and poke each of these banana tentacles until they're adequately grabby before sticking them onto a couple of lengths of wire that I pressed into my banana base. Finally, once I've blended them into the rest of the banana, I can get to work adding the texture. I want the interior tentacles to be appropriately tentacly, so I'm going to make them look kind of like 4 wavy textured tongues, while keeping the outside of the banana looking as close to a normal banana as possible, which, kinda means it looks like a tongue too. Then once I've added the terrifying little mouth at the center, I can start poking equidistant holes in each of the tentacles before slowly adding all the tiny banana teeth. Otherwise, with my teeth in place, the banana is basically finished and it's time to get started on the next fruit. Same as with the banana, I'll start by giving my apple a skeleton, then covering said skeleton in a thick layer of gray clay skin. Then it's just a case of building up the shape of my apple by adding clay around the top and creating a gentle and Flow Rida approved taper towards the bottom. I'll create the stem receptacle on the top and then split the bottom into 4 equal parts before cutting a big hole in the middle for my eventual apple mouth. Now, once I baked my apple in the oven, I realized that the mouth was too small, so I marked out a better size and carefully carved away the excess clay. I'll fill in the back of the mouth to cover up the exposed aluminium and then build up some great big Botox lips. Now, I was trying to figure out what kind of mouth an apple would have, and at first I considered giving it ridiculously big humanoid teeth, but I also kind of wondered what it would look like if the symbiote had bonded with an apple, so I went with a collection of extra long, extra spiky teeth. Of course, it wouldn't be a symbiote apple without an adequate number of stringy cheek details, so I've rolled out a bunch of wormy dealies and stuck them to the sides, blending them into both the top and the bottom. To try and help make the mouth fit a little bit better, I'll add a couple skin folds and ripples to the top and the bottom of the head before adding some creases and cracks to the lips. Otherwise, I'll make sure that the skin of the mouth blends smoothly into the rest of the apple before setting it aside and getting to work on the tongue. I figured at this point if I'm going to go with the symbiote styling for the apple, then I may as well go all in and give it a big, gross, sloppy symbiote tongue. So I've rolled a big ball of clay into a long, pointy, wormy dealie, then flattened it out on top, rolled some texture into the surface, and drawn a line down the middle. Then I can start adding finer and finer detail until I'm ready to stick it into my apple's mouth. Now, it's worth pointing out that I cured the clay beforehand to facilitate pressing it into the mouth without deforming it. Then I'll add a little bit of clay underneath so that I can make that tiny strip of skin that connects the tongue to the mouth. Finally, I made a teeny tiny stem to stick into the top of the apple, and it's all but finished, and it's time to make some strawberries. Same as before, I've made a set of tiny aluminium skeletons, then wrapped them in a layer of clay ready for the next step. Except I didn't plan ahead when I did all that, so these little clay straws are not the same as these little clay straws. On the surface, they're nearly identical, but I made the mistake of giving my strawberries a skeleton before realizing that strawberries are invertebrates and don't have skeletons. So for scientific accuracy, I had to remake them. Fortunately, however, because these are boneless berries, I can easily jam a stylus down the center to create the massive full-body mouth that is a staple of this species. I suppose if my banana is a demigorgon and my apple is a venom symbiote, then these berries probably most closely resemble the sarlacc. Externally, however, they're nearly indistinguishable from your everyday run-of-the-mill strawberries, so I'll use the sharp end of a tiny clay shaver to poke lots of little seed holes that I can fill in later. Finally, with one berry beast finished, I simply need to repeat the process a few more times. After that, I'm left with 5 similar but not quite right strawberries ready for their green tentacle tops. To give my sarlacc berries their leaves, I'll roll out a bunch of randomly sized wormy dealies, then stick them in place around the edge of the mouth hole before blending them together, adding some tentacly textures, and then bending them into an appropriately tentacly position, ready for baking. Finally, with the sarlacc berries cooking in the oven, I can add the final piece of my fruit bowl, some delightful grapes. I'll start by making a little chunk of clay, rolling it into a ball, then, well, that's kinda it. I guess just add this to the pile and it's into the oven. Of course, if I don't want my grapes to dry out, then I'm probably gonna need to add some eyelids. There you go, one perfectly sane, totally reasonable grape that's also an eyeball. All I need to do is repeat this process 20 more times, and I've got myself a vine of deliciously ripe grapes to add to the fruit bowl. Which means it's finally time to give these fruit a bit of color. I'll start by priming everything with a healthy white primer to make my life a little easier when I start to add the lighter colors. Then once it's had ample time to dry, I'll start by painting all the fleshy parts. Generally, when it comes to painting fleshy parts of a monster's mouth, I like to follow the more is more rule. I'll start by laying out a base coat of lighter pinks, then work my way through a series of darker and lighter highlights, alternating between reds, terracottas, pinks, and purples until it looks adequately unsettling. The trick here is just to keep going, and if it ends up looking really awful, just reprime it and delete the footage so no one ever knows you're just making it up as you go along. Oh, and use really thin paints as well. With the fleshy bits finished, I can get started on the main body of the fruit, starting with a yellow base coat for the banana, with a much lighter, nearly white but still yellow for the interior parts of the peel and the exposed section of the tentacles. I'll tickle the tip of the banana with a bit of green while the airbrush is out before moving on to adding the detail by hand. The top of the tip gets a dark brown covering, then I'll use one of my smaller ball styluses to haphazardly poke a cornucopia of brown dots and bruising all willy-nilly around the body of the banana. As banana gorgons age, their markings become more pronounced until they become nearly entirely brown with age. Usually at this point, they're too old to defend themselves and wind up in the stomach of their natural predator, the banana loaf beast. Otherwise, I'll give all the teeth a quick once-over with a white base coat before staining them with a sepia wash, then moving on to the apple. Now, I would really have rather painted the apple red because I'm all about that pink lady life, but I figured I had enough red colors in this fruit bowl, so for the sake of aesthetics, I guess this man-eating, horrifying monster apple is going to be based on a Granny Smith. Unlike Granny though, these teeth are all still in place and in need of a quick once-over, much like the banana gorgon, but because of the size, I'll go a few steps further, starting with a white, then the sepia, then another white glaze over the tips to give it a nice clean gradient. Finally, because this thing is predominantly tongue, I need to add some slobber. Enter Fabri-Tac, the glue I never use as a glue. This stuff is a glue meant for fabrics and soft materials, but I mostly just use it as a goopy, slobbery slime.
I hate the apple's tongue.
Why?
Because it's got saliva on it.
Now I'll give the Sarlacc Berries a quick base coat of red, followed by a couple spurts of dark red with the airbrush to give it a bit of surface variation, followed by a quick blast of high gloss varnish. Then I'll base coat the back sides of the tentacles with a dark green with light green highlights before very carefully painting each of the teeth inside. Now originally I wanted to make each of the seeds out of colored clay then glue them in place, but I gave up on that idea because I don't hate myself. So instead, a bit of paint in heavy medium should suffice. Now for my many-eyed grapevine, I wanted to try to get that sort of purpley red and slightly dusty white look, so I'm going to lay down a base coat of purpley red, then use a sponge to dab it away before following it up with a slightly lighter red shade, and finally a very light dusting of that dusty white top coat. Now I've touched up the white of the eyeball, then I'll use the tip of a sponge so I can mark out a nearly perfect circle for the iris. And once that's dried, I can start painting on the colors and adding all the details. Now I've got about 20 of these eyes to paint, so I made sure to make them all slightly different with different color combinations before coming back through and adding some of those exhausted red veins and finally giving everything a shiny resin top coat. Otherwise, the only thing left to do is put all my fruit in a bowl and we're on to the Glamour Shots. As always, a big old thank you to the wonderful patrons who continue to provide me with real food while I'm busy making ridiculous fake food. And of course, I'd like to thank the newest of these patrons: Jacob Wilson, Marvin Verkamp, Sheila Owen, B-Man714, Harry Papp, Gene Splicer, Krisheva McLaughlin, Dr. Popular, Brooklyn Ami and Zia, Iron Shrike, Andy Hay, Karis, Chloe Whiting, Dane Leargard, Nervous Narwhal, Steven Jackson, Frank Nordstrom, Schizo Chorizo, Spiniest Donkey Zero, Jeremy Hood, Phil S. Preston, Kitty Krillix, Dawick, Ryan Wicker, Aaron Olson, Joshua Haskett, Wacky Wallflower, Lucas Haskins, Joanna Balducci, Madison Neese, Laurel, Mike Smith, Trips Upstairs, Miracle Drivel, and Bunny. You are the inexplicably yellow crunchy bananas that provide the nutrition for this channel. If you'd like to help out, then make sure you wash your fruit before you eat them, and if they start to scream, then don't even worry about it. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.